Welcome, everyone. Today, I have the honor of conversing with esteemed writer and director and actor Barry T. Brodie, whose play An Echo of the Soul, Tchaikovsky and His Women, opened for a one-weekend run at the Masonic Temple Ballroom in January of this year. And now Barry is set to remount the play for a run from June 19th to June 27th at the Shadowbox Theatre as a co-production with Post Productions. So thank you very much, Barry, for agreeing to sit with me this afternoon.
Thank you, Michael.
So, we'll start maybe with the basics. So, for anyone not familiar with An Echo of the Soul, what is it about and what can audiences expect to experience?
Well, it's primarily a play about the Russian romantic composer Peter Ilyich Tchaikovsky, whom, if people don't recognize the name, they would certainly recognize iconic pieces of music, the Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy, the 1812 Overture, Romeo and Juliet Overture. His music is very popular and actually has been used to underscore many, many films over the years.
Hmm.
I had asked a friend of mine, I said, I'd like to write a play for you. Give me three historical figures that you'd like to play, and I'll pick one of those. So the one that I resonated most with was Tchaikovsky. I've always loved his music and been intrigued by what's behind these composers when they're writing these great works.
Yeah.
And in this case in particular, I had some familiarity with Tchaikovsky's life. There was a film many years ago by Ken Russell called The Music Lovers, which attempted to encapsulate the entire life. But the period that I focused on was the couple of years where he first met the two significant women in his life. One of them was his benefactress, Nadezhda von Meck, who very, very wealthy widow in St. Petersburg, who was very much supportive of his music and knew he was on hard times financially, said, I will support you with the one condition that we never meet face to face.
Hmm.
And so Tchaikovsky agreed to that. Within the same year, he received a letter from a former student of his at the conservatory, who professed this love that she had for him, a big crush. Now, the situation, of course, Tchaikovsky was gay, and he was at a point, he's in his, I think his early 40s at this point, and he was basically looking to perhaps have an arranged marriage that would cover up his sexual preference, and you could live peaceably within a straight marriage. And so he entertained her affections and so on. However, as true as he could be to himself at that time, he said, "I can only offer you, the love of a brother to a sister."
Hmm.
So it appears that Antonina Milyukova had the terms of the relationships lined out, and she agreed to it. However, this just did not work. It was terrible. It was nightmarish for Tchaikovsky. And very soon, she would never grant him a divorce, but at a certain point, they tossed a lot of money at her, and she went home to live with her mother. She would pop up from time to time over the years, because even up until his death, she never agreed to a divorce. I think that she really just wanted to be Madame Tchaikovsky,
Hmm.
and all that, whatever that meant to her. But I think she had a sad end from what history writes, and was admitted to a mental asylum. Meanwhile, of course, for 17 years, he had this thriving relationship with von Meck. And we know all this from just an immense correspondence, volumes and volumes of letters. And it was really in this correspondence that Tchaikovsky revealed his soul. I mean, you would think if you read the letters, you would think they were lovers. You know, the very intimate sharings, not only about personal things, but his whole philosophy and approach to music and art and that sort of thing or predominate the correspondence. So this, I decided to focus on the period of time, 1878 or 77 to 79, during which he wrote his Fourth Symphony, which he dedicated to von Meck. So it really focuses around the creation of that. He in his correspondence he keeps calling it our symphony, and that he couldn't have written it without both her inspiration as well as, of course, her financial assistance. Of course, being the masterful composer that he was, he wrote a few other things in that time period, including his opera Eugene Onegin and the violin concerto and some chamber music and songs and so on. So it was a prolific time, even though as he says in his letters, I can't work. My creativity is completely stymied by this terrible marriage that I'm in. But anyway, so that's what's going on. And what you see in the play is the initial encounters with these two women and how it unfolded, the time before the marriage, after the marriage, and then after Antonina, the wife, leaves his life, and it leads up to the premiere of the Fourth Symphony.
There's personal drama, there's historical importance, there's, this insight into creativity and the artistic process. And so there's a lot wrapped up in this short span of time that you've chosen to focus on.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, you've told us some about the relationships between Tchaikovsky and Van Meck and Antonina. Um, what were the important differences between those relationships in terms of their effect on Tchaikovsky as a person and as an artist?
Well, I think primarily, Michael, the difference was that von Meck, I would go so far as to say, worshipped him as a musician, as a
Mhm.
composer. I mean, she says as much. You are the preeminent example of music, and therefore the perfect human being. Whereas Antonina, one of the things that as he's lamenting the whole relationship, he writes to von Meck. She said she never refers to my work.
Mm.
Here she's supposed to be, the wife of a. I mean, he wasn't as famous as he became, but he was well known as a composer
Yeah.
in those days. Um, and she was a musician. She was a student at the Moscow Conservatory, and you would think would take some interest in his work. And he says she never asked about what inspired him, what his creative process was, and this kind of thing. So I think basically that was I think if somehow or other she could have at least supported him on that level, they may have stayed together, but not at all. And that was kind of you know, the straw that broke the camel's back for him. I can't be around someone who doesn't support me in my art and my craft.
Yeah, you mentioned an element of worship from von Meck, but it's about what's important to him, which is his music. And you mentioned also that Antonina had, a crush on him, but it sounds like that was based on something unimportant to him. It didn't relate to what mattered to Tchaikovsky. Is that fair?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
And as I say, it was when she appeared on the scene, it was at a time, as I said, when he was considering a beard,
Hmm.
a marriage that would cover, as he said, stop tongues from wagging,
Right.
and and it appeared that it could accomplish that, but in fact did not, and did anything but. It basically drove him kind of mad.
Yeah. I wonder too, it sounds as though perhaps at that point, Tchaikovsky himself didn't realize how important it was for whoever he was in a relationship with, regardless maybe of what kind of relationship, to have some intense interest in his art and his music.
Very much so, Michael, very much so. I mean, from your own experience, it's really hard to do what we do if we don't have people who help us.
Yeah,
In some cases, it's direct, colleagues in our field helping with this or that, and then just what they call moral support. Or
yeah, yeah.
and
Or just caring about what it is that we're spending so much blood, sweat, and tears on.
and as you know, when we get to those points where this is just terrible, this isn't going to fly.
Mhm.
I shouldn't be writing. I shouldn't be composing. They're there to say, "Whoa, you're just, this is you'll pass through this phase and keep going."
To
And
talk you off the ledge, so to speak.
yes, and getting more closer to home, I very much had that experience with this play.
Oh,
We're all kind of tender with our babies, but with this play, there was a certain element of it that I thought this isn't going to work. I mean, even after we were cast and rehearsing, and I was blessed with an amazing cast. Um, I thought, oh God, this may fall flat on its face. And as it turned out, it did not. It did quite the opposite. The cast delivered an amazing performance. And that was the challenge of writing a play where two characters never meet in person, and the other two characters meet, but then he wants nothing to do with her. So I think it says at one point he says, someone whom I never met and someone whom I couldn't get rid of fast enough. So this then leaves the challenge. Here's a perfect example of that. I had to trust. I had to very much trust my cast. As I've always said, 90% of directing is casting, and
Mhm.
they were able to come off with the kind of chemistry that was needed to be on stage with one another in different spaces, so to speak, and still communicate.
Yes, yes,
It's done primarily through letters, and so
yeah.
we use the conceit of letters being read, but you can't read a letter, to an audience all night. So we're able to move, sort of set that up, and then eventually move away from it. And Heath Camillus, who plays Tchaikovsky, and Cindy Pastorius, who plays Von Meck, do an amazing job. Um, and you think they're in the same room at the same time when
Yeah.
they never met, or there is one meeting that was per chance, but basically they never spent time, and yet they wrote volumes. The amazing thing about this particular period is even within, because I tried to remember to remain historically accurate, even within this 2 year period, the intensity of their correspondence got to a level of tremendous intimacy and detail about music and affairs of the heart and um, philosophy and those things. I mean, it just you would have thought that these people knew each other for a longer time than they did.
Yeah. Did did Tchaikovsky ever confess his sexuality to Von Meck?
We don't have any evidence that he did. There are various camps of thinking, including my cast. Von Meck, Cindy came to the conclusion and played it that she knew, but it didn't make any difference.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
Especially since, as they say, she worshipped him, and I don't think the the not meeting had anything to do with that.
Right.
When you hear the way she talks about him, it's almost like um, if they met, he would become too human for her.
Interesting.
Almost.
Actually, I did want to ask you about that too, so I'll skip ahead to that. But first, actually, I want to go back just briefly to that moment you mentioned, that on the ledge moment where you thought, well, this isn't working, this is
Oh,
going to be terrible and so forth. Did you? Were there particular people in your life who gave you that kind of support that you needed to get you through that period?
Um, in this case, it would be the cast
Yeah.
because they were the ones doing the thing, you know. I mean, I actually spent, for my experience, I spent a longer time on this script than others and had, gone back and with trying to make it sound conversational. But of course,
Hmm.
you're dealing with material, 19th century letters um, that were very formal, which you kind of have to, I mean, if you're making dialogue on stage, you have to make that a little more relaxed
Yeah.
and, and normal. Um, but in those cases where, for example, Tchaikovsky would write a very long letter to Van Meck and would hit certain talking points, I guess we talked today, and then of course would receive maybe 2 days later, remarkable, um, a response going over each of those points.
Oh, wow.
So here you had like two 4 or 5 page letters. And so what I tried to do was join up the points of discussion so that it sounded like a conversation, back
Yeah.
and forth.
So very attentive to each other's letters as well.
Oh, yes, very,
Yeah.
very much so. I mean, and then you have to understand that's how people communicated in those
Yeah.
days.
Yeah.
There was no Instagram, there was no telephone, no telegraph.
Yeah.
That's how and they would, when Tchaikovsky was traveling, he would say, I'll be in Florence next week, so write to me at this address in Florence,
Yeah.
so that she knew exactly where to find him.
Yeah. I
And,
used to do archival research from the late 1800s to the early 1900s, that period. And it's incredible the volume of correspondence between people and how eloquent they could be. And I don't know, there's something missing from modern communication. We don't have that.
yeah, there's,
But
for my taste, there's a certain level of poeticism.
yes,
It's
yes,
just it's just inherent in the way people wrote to each other.
yeah,
And it perhaps to a certain degree they did speak that way to each other, in a
yeah,
more formal
yeah,
time. And so to me, it's always the balance between keeping that higher language and yet still keeping it, dialogical.
yeah. So you mentioned the way that von Meck saw Tchaikovsky, the way she regarded him, and so forth. And I was thinking about that as well. I was wondering, for somebody who was, you know, very in the scene of the time, right? As an aficionado and as a patroness, uh, one might expect von Meck to have a very grounded attitude and approach toward composers, and perhaps she did when it came to other composers. But with Tchaikovsky, as you've indicated, there's almost this deification or this belief that he's tapped into something supernatural or celestial. Why do you think that is? What is it about Tchaikovsky that led her to hold him in such high esteem?
I don't know. She did support other composers.
Yeah,
In fact, Claude Debussy came and was sort of her household musician composer. She played the piano, so
yeah,
she was a musician in her own right. And actually, how she started working with Tchaikovsky was Tchaikovsky would do certain arrangements of his music, primarily. I mean, she would, let's say, for example, she went to see Swan Lake. She loved Swan Lake and asked him to do some piano violin reductions of some of the music from the ballet. And
right.
so this was how she was able to start supporting him. And then eventually he was onto the fact that she was sending a little bit more than those particular etudes or whatever were worth,
Mm,
uh, and then gets up the gumption to actually ask her for, for help financially. And she says, "Don't ever feel embarrassed. You must be supported because you have such an important place in the world as a composer and as a man, like as a human being creating in the world." Yeah, it's quite. I mean, in its own way, it's a kind of crush. But
yeah.
this is coming from as you say, a grounded, accomplished, very successful woman.
Did she hold other composers in as high regard as Tchaikovsky?
Well, if she did, she didn't express it to Tchaikovsky. I mean,
Okay. It's a fascinating thing too, this idea, that she expressed to him that you must be supported,
yes.
because this is important. And do you believe that the wealthy of say Russia in the late 1800s uh, believed in the value of things like the arts in a way that the wealthy of today do not?
That's awfully hard to say, Michael. You have a woman here. I mean, I don't know what the dollar amount is, but she supported him for 17 years. And he had a fairly lively lifestyle. I mean, this is not a recluse who would go off to the forest and write symphonies and send them into the city.
Right,
He traveled. He loved to travel, and he had, getting back to the other side of his life, he had a very um, I don't know if I'd use the word promiscuous, but he was active, as
right.
active certainly as a gay man could be in the middle of the 19th century, in the middle of Russia.
Yeah,
He was able to do that because he moved in aristocratic circles, and that class was able to get away with things. They'd have their own parties, their own weekends at this or that estate. So it was a fairly lively, sexual life, but
right.
nonetheless had to be. So she must have known. She
Yeah,
must have known, and obviously enough other people were surmising this to the point where he felt that he needed a beard, um,
right.
and so on. But it was his father. He said, I'd like to. But his father was very old, and he said, "I'd like to be married before he dies, so that he will see that I'm happily married." So there, I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
every
But
gay person has to deal with their parents, their family.
oh yes. Yes, in every time period, every epoch of human history. Yeah. But she knew she wasn't funding a spendthrift.
No,
No.
no. But she would, after a while, when he would ask, she said, "Don't feel embarrassed asking me." And that's when she turned the gift. It was a gift from time to time. She just put him on a salary
Oh, really?
at that point. Yeah.
Huh.
So he never had to ask her again. Then, of course, he did become quite successful, and towards the end of his life, didn't really need her money. And the um, research around why she abruptly stopped both the contributions and the correspondence. And I
Mm.
think what hurt him most was the correspondence, like not having anybody to communicate with. But they say that the financially that her kids were getting involved, and they said, you're giving away our inheritance.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and so they kind of said, "Hey, mom, you've got to, ease up on this." But why she terminated, I mean, once again, it could be she just, how you get sometimes with special relationships, and they need to modulate, and somehow you don't know how to deal with that. So you just
Yeah.
stop them.
And sometimes they burn out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I've not done research this is at the beginning of that relationship. I've not read any of the letters, say, in the last 2 or 3 years of their relationship, but
Mm.
you know,
Maybe a sequel.
maybe, yeah, maybe.
So I have to confess, the other relationship in this play, and I have to confess that when I first experienced An Echo of the Soul, I perceived cruelty in the relationship between
Mm.
Tchaikovsky and Antonina. And do you perceive cruelty in that relationship? And if so, what do you think would explain that from Tchaikovsky's point of view?
I don't know if I'd use the word cruelty, Mike. I
Okay.
I know we had. I was very intrigued. You were not the only person. You know,
Okay.
there was a real a pro Antonina
A
group
movement.
that responded. She's being put upon by both of them. Now, of course, she. It wasn't like Tchaikovsky necessarily said these things to her.
Hmm.
He said them to von Meck. And so the
Right.
two of them, yes, she's horrible, she's shallow, she's this, she's that. So
Hmm.
I don't think he was, I mean, if I don't know. He certainly wasn't cruel to her. He, may have ignored her or kept her at bay, so to speak, and wanted to be out of her presence very quickly. And then in the letters, I mean, he uses very forceful language about loathing her and detesting her, and yet goes back and forth with she knew what she was getting herself into. And I thought, well, the whole point of not supporting his music was a real shock to him.
Hmm.
He says to von Meck, she's a musician. She was one of his students at the conservatory. Why wouldn't she take an interest in my music? So I think
Hmm.
that boggled his mind. But I think both of them were just a little off. She was in her own little world, even after it became clear that Tchaikovsky did not want to live with her. She kind of justified it and tried to make it something else. Oh, he's tired, or he needs to work, and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Never really faced it. And he, I think, was um, just very. I think it probably drove him a little crazy.
I wonder too whether some of what I was perceiving as cruelty stemmed from hurt because she didn't seem interested in his music. And I wondered if
I
it was coming from a place of hurt.
I think so. I think
Yeah.
so.
And he did, as you mentioned, give her a caveat at the beginning that he could relate to her as a brother would to a sister, right?
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps, he also felt like, hey, I've given you this caveat before we entered into this
Yes,
agreement,
yes,
right?
very much so. Yeah, because I mean, and on the other hand, he says several times, "I know I'm doing the wrong thing here, but I'm going to do it anyway." Because at one point, she professes her love or her crush really so intensely that he says, "Well, my lord, if I spurn her, she'll kill herself."
Hmm.
And I think he sincerely thought that. So it becomes this crush, possibly this marriage that could cover things up, to suddenly I'm saving this girl from herself.
Right,
So
right,
to his side of the ledger, that's pretty crazy.
right.
That's pretty crazy. So
Yeah. We
yeah.
don't have letters between him and Antonina.
Um, only the early,
Okay,
like the courtship, so to speak.
right.
Um, when he says these things, and she goes to the chapel and prays every day that he will respond to her and so on. Um,
Yeah.
but
There was a real sense, I think, that comes through in the play of this girl, finding herself in sort of a desperate situation, what she thinks or anticipates should happen or should have happened isn't happening, and she doesn't know how to get past that, how to get out of it. And so
mhm.
she is appealing to higher forces or, appealing to hope that this will change at some point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's actually in the play, and this is one of the things that I didn't think would work, but there's a scene where it becomes this trio, if I can use musical terms, where von Meck and Tchaikovsky are talking about her, the failed marriage, um, just as much Tchaikovsky as Antonina. I mean, von Meck's no fool. Uh,
Right.
and Antonina is upstage, back of them, and she's sort of playing house with him and imaginary friends.
Right.
And
Yeah.
this somehow, thank God, came off in the performance.
Yeah.
And it was very challenging for the actors because, as you know, it's one thing to respond to a cue that connects, but
Yeah.
there were cues that did not connect, and
Yes.
they would come in at different times. But it actually worked very, very well. And then at one
Yeah.
point, she just, the last time he sees her, she puts him on a train, and she just says, "Well, he got a cough, and so he went over to get a drink of water, and then he got on the train, and I never saw him again."
Wow. Yeah.
And that's,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's heavy.
Yeah, it is. It is. But I was very happy that people got these levels,
Yeah.
some levels that I might not have intended, that just have to do with life.
Well, I agree. And in talking with people after the show and or people who had gone to see other performances of it afterwards, it was interesting what people were able to perceive, the connections that they were able to make, the questions that they were asking. It was really fascinating to hear those points of view and where they converged and where people had different interpretations of what was going
Yeah,
on and so forth, which is always what you want. It's always better to have
exactly.
multiple interpretations.
That's the fun of being a writer.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to change tacks. For audience members who aren't well acquainted with music theory or music analysis, or even who aren't incredibly familiar with classical music itself, what should they be listening for in the Fourth Symphony or the opera, the violin concerto, when they go home after seeing the play? What what do you suggest they pay attention to so they can hear the effects that these events had on Tchaikovsky's music?
Well, I would just hope that they would go home and listen to something by Tchaikovsky,
Anything by
anything by
Tchaikovsky.
Tchaikovsky. The Fourth Symphony is pretty much quoted throughout the play. I mean, I made
Mm,
sure that the four movements were represented. There are Tchaikovsky gets up. Actually, Tchaikovsky answers that question by getting up. The play starts with the premiere of the symphony,
yes.
becomes a flashback, and he actually got up at the end of the performance and said to the audience, there are two programs here. There's the one of that follows the music and how it unfolds, and then there's the program of my life that went into writing this, and
Mm,
that introduces the relationships with primarily with Van Neck, but with and Antonina as well. But I had wanted thank you for that question. It's a great question because um, uh, you don't have to know Tchaikovsky to come to the play and enjoy it, because
no.
each of us has his and her own creative process.
Hmm.
And you're going to identify with that somehow. You know,
Yeah.
whether you're um, as I always say, it doesn't make any difference what you create, but we're always creating it, even if it's just our lives.
Yeah. And I think if you know Tchaikovsky's music, that might enhance, your experience of the play. But
Mhm.
yeah, you're in my experience having seen it, yeah, you don't need to know it. It's not about that necessarily. It's much bigger. It's
Yeah,
much deeper and broader than that. Although it'd be wonderful, as you say, if people went home and then were inspired to listen to some more Tchaikovsky.
right, right. An interesting thing comes to mind, Michael, and I hadn't thought about it in years. Years ago, like decades ago, before I was out, I had a young man that I worked with in Arizona who he was in his early 20s, and he just thought it was the coolest thing that Peter Tchaikovsky was gay. And I remember, of course, here I am closeted at the time, and I say to him, and I'm also a little bit of a purist, and I said, like, what difference does it make whether the B flat is written by a straight man or a gay man? Um, and he just said, it just shows the courage of what a gay man can do,
Hmm.
and in a way, how he can go down in history and be considered a great composer. Now,
Yeah.
mind you, that was not his experience at the time, because he was
Yeah.
was not accepted as a gay man. But years later now, when I think about that, it inspired this young man because he loved Tchaikovsky, he loved the music, and knowing that Tchaikovsky was gay helped him on his, and
Mhm.
he was, God bless him, he was out. And this was way
Yeah.
back in the 70s in Tucson, Arizona,
Good Lord.
yeah, yeah. And he was out. Uh,
Yeah.
God bless him. I mean, part of me was, insanely jealous that he was able to do that. But,
Yeah.
and now today, of course, um, it's a lot easier than it
Yeah.
was, and certainly as it was for Peter.
And I think the effect that art can have, building on what you're saying, that effect can happen in all sorts of different ways to people who are othered or marginalized for various reasons.
Hmm.
That it can help them, I guess, internally fight against the negative messaging that they get, right?
Yes.
About how their lives are going to be limited or
Mm.
miserable or how they won't achieve things and so forth because of this particular category, right?
Yeah.
They belong to, whatever it might be that others and marginalizes them. And hopefully some people knowing this, having seen the play, feeling inspired by it and so forth, are inspired to go out and create, not because they're gay and Tchaikovsky was able to do this when he was gay necessarily, although that's great, but for whatever is holding them back, whatever societal judgment or taboo might be holding them back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so, man.
Now, when I was in high school, this movie came out that it's not very good, but it has Gary Oldman, who I love,
Mhm.
and it's called Immortal Beloved. Are you familiar with it?
Oh, yeah. The Beethoven.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Beethoven. Yeah, and I loved that movie at the time. I don't know, I was 15, 16,
Uh-huh.
and it led me to go out and um, buy CDs of Beethoven's work,
Way to
and
go.
I got really interested because of the movie. Even though the movie's not great, it has great moments, but it's not a great
It
movie
does.
overall. Um, and interestingly, like for many years, that just was an interest I had. I was really interested in Beethoven's music. And then, of course, much later in life, um, becoming disabled, I related to the story behind Beethoven's music, the story of his life in a completely different way, and found that it had a different sort of inspirational effect on me.
Here, here, here,
Yeah.
here. For sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
So it's one of those indirect reasons to just love the arts.
Yes.
So let's go back to process. You were just talking about process. And so I'd like to talk about that a little more in regard to Tchaikovsky. What exactly does the correspondence between von Meck and Tchaikovsky reveal about his creative process? What can we learn about his process?
Well, I think there are really two. There are passages. They're somewhat um, educational, for want of a better word, in which he describes how he works with musical material, etc. And of course, the musicologists love this because it's
Yeah,
the only place he's ever written about this kind of thing. So, why he chooses this kind of key for this and so on and so forth. But I think what is much more telling and why I chose this is because you're seeing this man complaining to Von Meck, I can't write. I cannot write. I'm terrible. Meanwhile, he puts out a three-act opera, a symphony, and a concerto, and all of these other things. In spite of so we're seeing and she will, getting back to people that support you in your dark hour, she'll write to him and say, Piotr, you need to get away. You need to go to Italy and relax and get away from all of this. And here's the check, like real practical support.
yeah,
And so there's that creative process too,
yeah,
because she is at the one time picking up the tab, but she's also giving him the support and the permission, if you will, to go ahead and rise above all this stuff. go
Yeah.
and compose and finish the opera, finish the symphony, and so on.
I really like the idea of focusing because as I remember it, much of the play really does focus on um, Van Meck more than I thought it would. Obviously the Tchaikovsky is sort of front and center, but there's a lot more of Van Meck than I was expecting. And what I love about that, and it relates to what you were just saying, is uh, the difference that that kind of person can make in someone's life, that kind of support can make in someone's life.
Oh, immense. I mean, you know what it's like. Sometimes all you need is a pat on the back. And
Right.
to us artists, that's, like the Nobel Prize.
Yeah. It's funny to me too, as you said, that he's writing all of these things and complaining simultaneously that he can't write.
Right.
So, what were his expectations for himself?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know?
Well, he says what's fascinating to me, Michael, is that, I mean, mind you, and I'm sure we've each had this kind of experience. This is his fourth symphony. Uh, in terms of major works, he's had three successful earlier symphonies. The fourth symphony is by far a departure from number three.
Hmm.
So, in his own personal creative movement, number four has paved new ground, so to speak. It has the distinction of a first movement that is longer than the rest of the symphony.
Oh, wow.
And in terms of development of music and so on, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Formally, structurally.
A real
Um,
break with the form of the time.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, or playing with it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and stretching it. By the by, the same thing is true of Beethoven's Third Symphony. The first movement of the Eroica is as long, if not longer, than the rest of the three movements of the symphony. So,
Which which shows you how unobservant I am, having never noticed that.
well, I never noticed it either until a conductor pointed it out. But anyway, that kind of thing is going on, and uh, yeah, it's just amazing that he's able to do these things and, as I say, complain about not being able to. But expectations, that's for sure.
Yeah.
He says at one point um, that during his dark night of the soul, he was afraid that he would die, whether that was by his own hand or something else. And so he inscribed on the score, in the event of my death, this score goes to Nadezhda von Meck.
Right.
And then he doesn't die. Premiere of the symphony, he gives her the score anyway, but tells her that he really felt at that time that this was the best thing he'd ever written.
Yeah. And sometimes the expectations we set for ourselves and the pressures we put on ourselves are our enemies.
Mhm. Yeah.
Perhaps unrealistic at times. Now, in terms of creative process, I want to turn now to you because I'm always interested in people's creative processes. Um, Whatever their form of creativity may be. But also because I'm teaching four playwriting courses this year at the Shadowbox Theatre, and I think my students could benefit from learning about you and your process. So I guess my question is, I guess one way of asking it is, what is your creative process? But maybe a better way to ask it is, what are the necessary or habitual or regular parts of your creative process, the things that seem to be part of what you do, no matter what it is you're working on? And maybe what are some that may or may not show up depending on the work?
Um, Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful question. I think first and foremost, Michael, the first element is inspiration. Um, I have to kind of want to do something. In terms of playwriting, in my own historically speaking, my first plays were musicals, which were original scripts. Um, Although an early sin of youth was a send up of Oedipus Rex, which gave me something to hang on to.
Yeah.
But my first serious play was a biographical. play about Teresa of Avila, the Spanish mystic, which
Hmm.
I wrote as my master's thesis. And somehow or other, like I knew I was going to be writing a play because I was, in a theology and arts program, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to express my theology in terms of dramatic form. So I knew I wanted to write a play, and somehow I wanted to write about a female mystic. Those were the two elements that came. So
Okay.
narrowed it, having just finished a church history course, that narrowed it down to either Teresa of Avila or Catherine of Siena. So it was either Spanish, Italian. And so I
Mhm.
chose Teresa. So I dove into the research, and I have to admit, I'm enough of a scholar that I really enjoy getting up to my elbows in research of these things. And I look back on it, and it just amazed me that I wrote that play in a matter of months. And it, became,
Youth.
yes, yes. And I look back, I read it now, and it's not a bad work.
Good.
Um, and then my next major play was for my doctorate, and that was kind of based on um, it was a cycle of short one-act plays based on the events of the apostles after the Pentecost, and drawn almost entirely from the Apocrypha, which is that
Yeah.
portion of the Bible that didn't make it into the canon.
Yeah.
Much more interesting than
The politically unpopular books.
yes, yes, rejected um and then for some reason, I found myself turning to biographical material, which is not, surprising because it kind of started out that way. Um,
Mhm.
and again, it was being an inspiration, either an inspiration to write about a certain figure or an event, something that prompts, with the Tom Thompson play, it was, the Canada 150. Um, a very dear friend of mine, uh, very much involved in the arts in Canada. When she was being interviewed, she said she felt that the Canada 150 should be celebrated with new work.
Mhm.
Shouldn't be pulling out archives, but should be new work. And so I'm, scouting around for a subject, and somehow Tom Thompson, came to mind. So then it was, again, doing the research and coming up with, you know, uh, a piece of theater that would express that.
You know,
So
and I've told you this before too, and I still mean it. That Tom Thompson, Threshold of Magic, is one of the most intense and engrossing and memorable theatrical experiences I've ever had.
thank you, Michael. Thank you. I'm very proud of that. Very.
It, yeah, I had never seen anything like it, and I don't know if I ever will see anything like it. Uh,
Yeah.
it was very special.
I'm sorry that work didn't kind of find its way, not into a major canon or anything like that, but it's such a it's a helpful work even educationally, because hey, even in 2017, there were people in Canada who did not know who Tom Thompson was.
Yeah.
So seems to me I'm always plagued by, there will always be somebody who doesn't know who I'm writing about.
Oh,
And,
sure, sure.
that's, so I have to, not have to, but I then strive to find out what's common in that character. What do I want to people to come away from knowing that character, um, that they can bring into their own lives and their own experience.
Something that connects, that resonates.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you mentioned the inspiration and then really focusing on the
Research.
character, the research that goes
Yeah.
into this and focusing on the character and trying to figure out what to bring out about that person and so forth. How do you go from that stage to a draft of the script? Are you drafting as you're researching and figuring things out, or do you make notes, work from notes? How does that work for you?
That passage, Michael, is messy.
Yeah.
Uh, it's messy. Usually I'll do a whole bunch of research and then sort of come up for air and say, oh, and then write the play fairly quickly because everything's sort of there. Uh,
Right.
and I do kind of scout around for a form to to hang the thing on.
Yeah.
With the Thompson, it was fascinating. I was it's as you know it starts with Thompson's death. I was did not want to deal with that aspect at all. The guy died. Okay.
Right.
So what I wanted to portray was how did he feel about his life?
Right.
So he goes into the Bardos and these various influences on his life, his family, his fellow artists, and so on, come and visit him. And in the case, the conceit of the play, he takes those on himself, and it becomes a one man show. Now, initially, I started with his mom
Mm.
and progressed through the play, and it ended with um, the later influence in his life, like McDonald and Lauren Harris and those fellows, which he met later in life. And then someone with whom I was working um, and who was supposed to play the role turned the whole play on its end, and we started with the end, and he plays down, so to speak, through his early life, and the last scene is his mother.
Ah,
And it
interesting.
was brilliant. Like it was like that one thing that just um, affected the whole play.
And when he first brought this idea to you to sort of flip it around, were you horrified or anxious about it at first, or did you
I
feel
I,
less
I don't know.
prejudice?
We all bristle a little bit. There's the part about what are you saying?
Right?
And then there's and this is really important because it's part of the collaboration. I don't write in a vacuum. There is no way that I write in a vacuum. And anybody who shares anything about how and I choose what I call friendly ears.
Hmm.
And I choose to reach out to people because I know A, they'll be gentle, B, they'll be brilliant, or maybe you know vice versa. Um, and so when they offer something, I listen
Yeah.
and put it in the hopper, try it on. I have another dear fellow playwright who somehow or other, with the exception of the Tom Thompson, um, whatever I present to him, he always suggests another character. And that's something I get annoyed. But sure enough, it works. Like it works on two plays particularly. He said, "Yeah, I think there should be a child in this." The Great Round Wonder.
Oh, okay.
The kid
Yeah,
was
yeah.
all his idea. He said there should be a child. He actually said there should be kids in the show. I said, no way. You yourself know what a pain in the butt that is. I said, how about one? you know, and so that's how the young girl.
And that character brings a completely different perspective into the
Mhm,
dialogue.
mhm.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it did
yeah,
exactly what it was supposed to do, you know.
yeah. I have the same habit as you in that whatever I'm writing, whether it's a play or a short story or an essay or article, book, whatever it might be, I need to have, I call them critical friends,
Yes.
that I can show these to who I know will actually pay attention
Yes.
and will criticize the work because I need the work criticized. I want it criticized, and of course, I don't mean that in the negative way
No.
necessarily, but I want to I want to know everything that is functioning well, that isn't functioning well, and who are friendly and constructive and will provide good ideas based on those criticisms.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It takes some time sometimes to find the right people to do that,
Sure.
but it's hard for me to even imagine putting something out there into the world without going through
About
that
that.
process.
So that's definitely part of my creative process is having that kind of input.
Do you go through several rounds of that?
Um, it depends. I did with Tchaikovsky.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. I have learned that in those past, usually I would have those readings with writers and directors, but I have learned that it is really helpful to have some actors.
Hmm.
there because the actor comes in with how do I play this part? Like, you
Right.
know, the rolls the sleeves and so they'll go right to some. That's why I was so amazed with this cast with Echo is that they made it work. I mean, they didn't see a problem. Like it was really amazing. You don't invite folks to things like that, whom, as you say, are not friendly or sympathetic or
Yeah.
support, you know.
Yeah. You want people who know will have your best interests at heart.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that who have some chops,
Yeah, for
you
sure.
know, they know their way around, they're playwrights, they know their way around these things. This fellow who suggested the flip was not particularly a playwright, but he was an actor.
Hmm. Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
just said, why don't you just put it on its end? And sure enough, it made all the difference.
So how long does this process take you typically?
It depends. As I say, Tchaikovsky took a couple of rounds, more because of casting and scheduling and stuff like that. Um, and one of the things that kind of came up was there there seemed there was another cast being considered at that time, and there seemed to be this issue that the speeches were too long.
Mm.
Um, these are actors who work with Shakespeare, so I was very surprised to hear. So I did take it to heart and
Yeah.
tried to, you know, streamline the dialogue so that you're not listening, you know, to a big diatribe or something like that, or something that's going to get because some of the material with Von Meck gets pretty heady, you know,
Hmm.
and I dispersed it differently throughout the script
Hmm.
so that you weren't getting it all.
So you
Um,
retained the material, but you actualized it differently.
yeah, like I wouldn't
You
have.
organized it.
It wouldn't necessarily be if you went through it and put a timeline as to when these things were written. They would not be. They're in the same 2 year period, but they're not at the same, you know, time. So
Yeah.
I I give myself that kind of license, but generally I try to be accurate in terms of nobody says something they didn't say.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think with something like this, there is a general understanding that artistic license
Mhm.
needs to be taken
Oh
for
yeah. I
all
mean,
sorts of reasons.
yeah.
Yeah. Now you mentioned you did start talking about this, and I just want to dig into a little more. The staging of An Echo of the Soul is really unique, and your stagings are always unique. Um, but you mentioned, the problem of having a play in which the characters didn't actually interact very much and or at all, and they communicated mostly through letters. So how do you create an engaging piece of theater out of that? Could you give us a little more information about how you approached and solved this problem?
Well, getting back to kind of a musical idea, since there was no locale, the letters, you know, took place, you know, in people's homes, hotels, on the road, etc. I wanted some kind of unifying factor, and again, it came in a flash, was to set it in an orchestra, so that when the audience came in, they saw an empty orchestra, um, and and the music stands became focal points for the actors to move depending on um, how close or apart they were either physically at the time or emotionally. You know, this is
Yeah.
why, for example, Antonina stays back upstage, rarely comes into Von Meck and Tchaikovsky's area. Um, and then in terms of Von Meck and Tchaikovsky, I wanted them to be times when they would be, you know, shoulder to shoulder or back to back. But by this time, we've already established that they're not in the same place.
Right.
So they start out in different parts of the stage and move. And that worked out really well because the actors very much responded to that and were able to create. They had little stations where you know, Tchaikovsky composed, and a podium at the what would be the where the conductor would stand that he could use actually to address the audience.
Hmm.
And it worked. I thought it worked really well, and a lot of people commented on that. So again, it
Oh,
was
yeah.
took the cue from a musical event. You know.
Yeah, we loved it, and it makes sense. It's on theme. It has symbolic significance, and I really loved the use of physical proximity to communicate emotional proximity. So
Mhm.
beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, so slightly different. Actually, no, this is related to what we were just talking about. How do you separate your work or who you are as a playwright from your work as a director? Especially in a situation like this where you're playing both roles, right?
Yeah.
At different points in time, but playing both roles. Uh, how do you stay in your lane? How do you make sure that Barry the playwright doesn't interfere with Barry the director and vice versa?
Um, Not an easy task, but one that
No.
I've kind of learned over the years because, with the exception of one or two instances, I have always directed my own work. Um, in fact, earlier with the Teresa play, for example, I um, I told myself as playwright, don't worry about this script as a director. And it's interesting. It's one of the few plays that I've written that has not been produced.
Oh.
So I gave myself free rein for stage directions, set, all this kind of. It takes place, in 17th century Spain. Over seven, it's seven scenes from her life. So it starts with, she's a child to on her deathbed, and it takes place in cathedrals, in convents, out of doors, and things like that. And I just wrote it, and figured, well, if I ever direct it, then I'll deal with that. Um, I don't know. I can't help but think that. But I try when I'm writing, I try to keep the director out of it.
Right,
When I'm directing, I just try to, maintain the integrity of the script.
right. I always feel as a director, one of your prime, and actually as an actor, one of your primary responsibilities is to make a good faith effort to respect the intentions and goals of the playwright. Um, and I imagine in this case it's easier.
Yeah, well, yeah. And it's interesting after a certain point, um, I'm more concerned directing than I am with the script. And a couple of times with Echo, um, you know how sometimes actors can get derailed. Uh,
Mhm.
I even I didn't know that they had. That my stage manager and lighting director, Jazz, whom
Oh yeah.
um, at one point he came over and whispered, he said, they're way off. They're way off here. And but they were covering. I mean, like they were, doing what an actor, should do. So even the playwright wasn't sure that, they were. And it's in this tricky section that I was talking about.
Yes.
But so anyway, we stop and go back and so on. And they had, I mean, I was very grateful. They had a tremendous um, adherence and respect for the language, even in these passages where nothing connects, um,
Hmm.
to make it sound disconnected and yet moving along,
Yes.
you know.
And using what's available to them in those moments to ensure that the meaning of what's being spoken is still
Yes,
conveyed.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And
yeah,
if you ever go back or decide to direct the Teresa play, it would be interesting because obviously you're at a very different time of your life, a very different stage of your life than you
yes,
were when you wrote it. And I wonder what director Barry T. Brodie would think of playwright Barry T. Brodie with that gulf of time in mind.
yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I've gone back to read that script. Actually, at one point, I thought, let me try to get the Carmelite nuns to support a production of it or something because I was thinking,
Oh.
this is pretty much a niche play, and so I reread it. I didn't edit it. Not until I were to put it on stage would I even tamper with the script. Um, and I'm reading this thing and I'm thinking, this isn't half bad. Um, and trying to remember what it was like writing it. not there. I
Yeah.
just, I'm in awe of it. I thought, my God, whatever you must have done to get this to this point was awesome. And as I said, I wrote it in one semester. Like, I took a church history course in the fall, and then I had to produce a master's thesis that spring. So I
Wow.
wrote it in what, 3 or 4 months?
Yeah. That's a tight timeline.
Yeah, but then again,
But
that's all
I,
I was doing. I was in school.
yeah. Well, I hope that the younger Barry would be pleased that the older Barry is proud of the work.
Yes, I think I could say that. Yes.
Okay, so speaking of this unification of Barry T. Brodie over the span of time, um, I would say, and I hope you agree, and even if you don't, I'm still going to say it, that your work is widely regarded as intelligent and moving and unique, and that in the plays I've seen that you've written and directed have all struck me in that way. But what would you say are the characteristics that unite the corpus of Barry T. Brodie as a playwright? What makes something a Barry T. Brodie play other than the human being who wrote it?
Um, I think it's ingredients. Um, First of all, it has to be beautiful. And in the case of the historical work, it should be accurate. As I said before, I don't ever want to put into the mouth of an historical character something that he or she didn't say or wouldn't have said. And then, you know, provocative. And
Hmm.
someone once said of my work that it um, pushed people to consider deeper, higher things. That every time you go to a Barry Brodie play, you were challenged to either see something deeper or wider um, from that. So I would like to think that it's challenging in a healthy way.
Right, yes.
You know,
So,
and in the
oh,
course of that, find something within yourself to relate to.
hmm, yeah. So beauty, accuracy, um, challenge, a push to self-reflect. I mean, those are wonderful characteristics too.
And
Um,
a high regard of language, Michael. Did you know that?
oh, high regard for language. Absolutely. You are
Yeah.
an eloquent speaker, eloquent and elegant speaker and writer. So that definitely would be a feature, I would think.
Thank you.
And thematically, I mean, one of the themes that An Echo of the Soul deals with is, I guess you could say, the role of suffering in the life of an artist.
Mm, mm,
Um,
mm.
what can you tell us about that, and what other themes does the play deal with?
Uh, yeah, it's interesting you bring out that suffering because clearly Tchaikovsky, I would say, is of the school that art comes out of suffering.
Hmm.
I mean, I think I could say that and not misrepresent him. Um, I don't necessarily agree with that. In
Hmm.
other words, I don't think suffering is necessary to produce something beautiful and transcendent.
Hmm.
But he in overcoming the vicissitudes of his own life, we're left with masterpieces.
Hmm.
Um, and there's a mystery in there. And as I say, for many artists, that works. Um, I don't know if Thompson would have subscribed to that. His challenge was, "Am I good enough?"
Right.
Which I guess is a kind of suffering,
Sure,
uh,
self-doubt can be suffering.
self doubt, and I think we all have that.
Yeah.
Um, um, yeah, I would say that it can be uh, galvanized. That suffering can you know be used to turn into something else. But as I say, I don't feel it's necessary, but it's
Right.
certainly, you know.
Well, and as you mentioned with Tchaikovsky, it's not really the suffering itself that led to the great art, but the overcoming of the suffering,
Mhm.
right?
Or in spite of the suffering,
In
Michael.
spite, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, I think that's certainly what I've come away with from Tchaikovsky. And
And
here we are, looking at him, and here the guy is, in the throes of despair, and I'll never write another piece of music again. And then, you look at the output, and it's it's an opera, a symphony, and it's a concerto, at least in those two years. I mean,
yeah,
at least that, yeah, if not more. But
what do you think? I mean, you've mentioned, I think, one thing already early in our conversation, um, the necessity of having, the support and care of others. And that seems to me an influence that can help transcend the suffering or overcome the suffering,
mhm,
so that great art can come out of it. What else do you think can facilitate that path through?
the path through the suffering.
Yeah.
Um, well, genius.
Nothing we can
Um,
do about that.
right. I mean, and I mean that in a general way.
Yes.
Genius meaning that which drives us.
Yes.
You know, or the daimon in the Greek sense. The demon, the inherent spirit that drives us towards creativity or drives us to create.
Yes. Or
With
Schopenhauer put it, I think it was Schopenhauer, that genius hits a target no one else can see.
Yeah, or it's a state of being.
Ah, yes.
Which everyone has, but to a greater or lesser degree. The genius never knows that he or she is the genius.
I agree with that. I think if someone believes they're a genius, it's a good sign they aren't.
Yeah. It's like humility, I'm
Yes,
very
humility
humble.
is important. Yes. But on the other side, you mentioned already that suffering isn't necessary to the creation of great art, and I would agree. Um, what holds people back? So artists who are suffering, who want to create great art, but are suffering and are not able to transcend it, to move through it, um, and get to the creation of great art. What do you think it is that impedes or obstructs them?
Hmm. Um, I guess what's coming to mind is something like writer's block.
Hmm.
Would you consider that an example of that or something deeper?
I think I might think of writer's block in itself as a form of suffering, right? Intense frustration.
Yeah. And
Um,
there is a certain um, there's a certain Nike thing about just do it. Like what's her name? Julia. No, I say Julia Roberts. It's not Julia Roberts. Julia, the writer's way, the
Oh,
artist's
yeah.
way.
Yes.
Uh, that's why she has the morning pages
Hmm.
to help somebody with writer's block. Just write 3 pages.
Yeah.
Just write it. Don't worry about beginning the great Canadian novel or the new epic poem or something. Just write. Just write, and there's something to be said for that.
Yeah. One of my
Just
writing teachers when I was a teenager told me that if you wait around for inspiration and say, I'll start writing when the inspiration hits, you'll never write.
right.
You do the work until the inspiration comes.
So you're ready.
Yeah, you're
I,
ready.
I
Yeah.
used to say to students in the creativity course, you have your 10,000 hours of whatever it is that's your métier. It's your toolkit. And if it's your playwright, a painter, musician, um, a pilot, whatever realm of creativity. So when inspiration comes, it comes to you to respond to in that envelope.
Yes.
Many people are gifted to be able to do that in several uh, métiers or genre. Um,
Hmm.
it, but you have to have you have to have your craft uh,
Hmm.
ready to do that so that when the poem comes, there's a wonderful poet whose name escapes me right now, Ruth Stone. It didn't escape me, who talks about being pursued by the poem.
Hmm.
And she would have she'd be out in her out in the garden or something, telling, and suddenly she would feel a poem coming at her physically, and she would have to run into the house and get ready with pen and paper or typewriter or computer, whatever, to
I
receive the
love
poem
that.
when it came.
I love that.
Yeah. And I think that there's, I mean, I've had to a certain degree experience like that, more so in writing poetry than perhaps in writing theater, although ideas will come
Hmm.
and they'd better be at least sketched or you
Yes.
lose. Yeah.
I think of one important aspect of craft as discipline, right? And
Mhm.
and by which I mean the discipline of applying oneself to doing the work without waiting for external stimuli
Yeah.
or something to push you into it. That there's discipline in just getting down, if you're a writer, getting something down on paper or on your computer, and as you mentioned before, so that you're prepared when the inspiration hits. And I've had this experience where I've written pages and pages and pages of garbage, but having that garbage in place uh, meant that when I finally got the inspiration or figured out a problem that was holding me back, uh, I'd already excised things that I would have ended up editing out anyway.
Hmm.
Do you find
That's
that?
nice. When that happens, that's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very nice. Very therapeutic. Yeah.
Because yeah, they're usually, if I look back, they're almost always the sorts of things that I would have put into the first draft of the script. And when I went back 2 weeks later or whatever and looked at it, thought, oh, good Lord, no. And
Mhm.
then edited all of that out.
Yeah.
Um,
Indeed.
tell me about your actors. Why these three actors in these three roles, and what do they bring to their characters that you hadn't anticipated?
Dedication and fortitude. I mean, I'm dealing with two BFAs and a woman who is, she's an educator and just has a whole sense of commitment, um, who truly believes in not only in doing it well, but doing it thoroughly.
Hmm.
And I think there's a certain amount of scholar in each of them.
Hmm.
It's really probed their characters. Um, and I love that. I mean, I respond very much to that. And who comes with as much, if not more, information about their characters than I have.
Yeah.
And being able to, and then now talking about, okay, what, how does Von Meck view Tchaikovsky's sexuality? Does she know about it? And answering those questions, which as an actor, you have to answer those questions to be able to walk on stage.
Yes.
Yeah,
In order to bring authenticity into the performance.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
I think they and training, they're all consummate technicians. Um, but it's the in these days, Michael, it's the commitment.
Yes.
And
Yes. That
which is
is
why I'm thrilled that we're doing this remount
good.
because it's they really wanted to do it again, which was keen, very keen.
Yeah.
There was a possibility of doing it at Fringe, which would have been in August, and they were keen on that. We didn't get chosen for Fringe,
Well,
but I'm
Fringe is
happier with
awesome.
this arrangement.
I
Um,
am too.
yeah.
And I'm very
Here, here,
glad. I'm very glad that you're
here,
going to
here.
be remounting this at the Shadowbox Theatre.
Yeah.
So, to our audience, don't miss it. June 19th to 27th at the Shadowbox Theatre. You will not forget this play, and you certainly won't regret seeing it. And tickets are available now at postproductionswindsor.ca. Thank you very much, Barry, for sitting down for me with this for this interview. And I apologize if I've taken up too much of your time. You need to go have dinner.
It's always a pleasure, Michael. Always a pleasure. We could go on for hours. We know that.
We absolutely could. All right,
Great.
enjoy your evening.
Thanks so much.
All right.